All right, going to call a special meeting of council to order for Wednesday, April 23rd. Approval of the agenda, please. Councilor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor. That the April 23rd, 2025 regular council meeting agenda be adopted as presented.
Seconder. Councilor Noxena. All in favor? Carried. Before we go on to new business, just want to make sure everybody is aware that Councilor Julik is attending via Zoom, and so is the CFO. New business, 2025 property tax rate alternatives. Report dated April 23rd, 2025 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding the 2025 property tax rate alternatives. Recommendation. Councilor Noxena.
Can we get this for discussion perhaps first?
Seconder. Councilor Norbury. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you. I'm just hoping that we can get a rundown on this from staff. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Scott, is staff prepared just to give an overview of where we're at, how we got here?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, reading the report, there's a lot of information to absorb, and it probably would be a good idea for council and for anybody who happens to be watching online, if our Director of Finance could kind of give a brief summary of the differences between the options and what it ultimately means.
Thank you.
So yeah, Chief, the Director of Finance, if you were able to give a brief summary, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I've given in front of you 4 different options for setting tax rates, and it takes into consideration something called non-market change. Non-market change means it's not driven by the market, so it's an increased assessment. It typically comes from new subdivisions, and in this case, it came from Kanuma and major industry. So when it's non-market change, it can impact. So if all of a sudden all the assessments went up, rates could go down and people start paying less if you had more inventory coming into your. So based on that, I went and started off with option number 1, which option number 1 is the recommended option. And that goes to council's mandate. It has a 9% increase for all of the property classes, with the exception of 2, and that is utilities, because utilities can only be a maximum of 40 or 2.5 times the business rate. So because of the business rate, if you went 2.5 times, the highest the district can go is 40 for that rate for utilities. And it was also recommended that major industry only have a 0%, as they're going to be paying a huge amount of the non-market change. It was recommended to leave them at 0 so that their tax rate would be staying the same as the other. Because of that, the non-market change then results in 6.179 million extra funds that come into the district, of which 40% has the bylaw, or 5.1 million would be going into a reserve. Option 2 is do not adjust taxes for the non-market change, just do everything that has been done in the past. So for class 4, which has had this significant increase, you'd be just collecting the same amount of taxes based on the same percentages as before. So with option number 2, you would be looking at the increase of, I believe it's 10.7%, or it had to be 11.25%. increase to the property classes, because the highest the utilities could go was the 8.48 basic, once again the highest being 40 or 2.5 times the business class, which, as you can see in this case, it's 41 for the rate. That being said, there is no money going into any additional funds going into a reserve. There are no additional funds for helping in the future. Say if the mine closes down or drops out of class 4 again, there's nothing extra going into those reserves. Now, option 3 is collecting the 9.9% on all of the property classes, except for the utilities again, and to also use that 9% as the number for doing the non-market change, which creates a significant increase for the mine for the class 4 major industry. So this would bring in an additional 6.75 million, which could then be transferred into reserves. And then there's option 4. And option 4 is doing a 0% tax increase for everybody. And so everybody would be paying based on the same rate as they did in the previous year. And the additional, those rates would be applied to non-market change, and then the additional funds would be coming out of the amount that was from the non-market change, which is reducing it. And that's the 4 options. I'm happy to clarify if you need further clarification.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. Thank you, Ms. Weiner, for that explanation. I had some questions in regards to a couple comments you made regarding money going into reserves. So in option 1, you mentioned that we're going to be able to, I'm just pulling it up on my sheet. We'll be, you mentioned that we're going to put 6.179 into reserves. Can you tell me, oh, sorry, I see it, $6 million is going to be placed into the tax stabilization reserve, paving reserves, or utilize to fund a new fire hall. I'm aware that in previous years, we've determined that we definitely want to tax for asset management, because that's just a process we should always be working towards, so we don't have to pay everything all at once when the assets fail. Do we have a policy or bylaw in place that we have to put this money aside? The reason why I'm bringing this up is that are we taxing $6 million more than we have to with this option?
Ms. Scott?
Thank you.
I will direct that question to the Director of Finance to provide that clarification. Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Norbury, the $6.1 million we have to put, and the district hasn't actually been putting the 40%. There's a policy in place that says to put 40% of industrial and light industrial into a tax stabilization reserve. So based on that policy and the figures that are in here, $5.1 million would have to go into the tax stabilization reserve.
Follow up?
Yes, okay, thank you. Then my question goes to option 3, and you list that we're going to make we're going to have $6.7 million transferred to reserves. So it seems to me that the difference between option 1 and 3 is if that we have a 9% tax increase to all classes versus all classes but major industry. And I'm aware of the utilities. I'm aware that that's regulated. We would only get another $0.7 million from adding in the 9% increase to major industry, or is this $6.7 million in option 3 listed in addition to that $6 million that we were just talking about?
Ms. Scott? Clarity?
Yeah, no, I think I understand what you're asking, and I'm sure that again is something that the Director of Finance, I think, can answer better than I can.
Through the mayor to Councillor Norbury, yeah, the $6.7 million that you see for option 3 is the amount that would be available to go into reserves, asset reserves, as well as tax reserve, tax stabilization reserve. So it's not in addition to what there. So there's only an extra $700,000 that would be coming in if we do the 9%.
Thank you. That does answer my question.
Councillor Hoffman?
Thank you, Mayor. Same area. Just to understand the difference between option 1 and option 3 for me. In option 1, neither the utilities nor the mine would have any increase. It would be 0 for both, versus option 3 where it would be 9% on the mine and 5.34 on the utilities. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what I'm seeing.
Ms. Scott?
I don't see where option 1 does not include an increase to utilities, but again, I will ask the Director of Finance to clarify that.
Through the mayor to Director Councillor Hoffman, In option one, it does include an increase of the 5.34% to utilities. The only 0% increase would be to major industry.
Okay, thank you.
Any follow-up, Councillor Hoffman?
No, that's, I just wanted to get clear on what numbers we were talking about for each. I'm good.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Ms. Scott, I got a couple. So previous years going through budget, we would, and maybe staff's prepared to do it, but we would have a chart, Excel file on the screen that we can move things around. Is that available tonight? So I understand that staff's prepared this and brought it out in an option, which is great. Appreciate that. But when we see it live on the screen and we're able to move numbers and, staff has talked about the options and if you were to do this and you were to do that. But sometimes when we move it and you actually get to see it, you get to see why the options were picked. Is that available tonight?
So basically, like, what's in the package, but being able to put up on the screen so you can see those differences?
You'll be able to move it, it's a live file. So let's say we don't want to do 0% here, or we don't want to do just 9% to residential, we want to take some of the 9% and move it somewhere else.
So I don't have that available, but I would ask the Director of Finance if she has that file that she would be able to share her screen so you could see changes made live. I don't know, can you, are you able to do that?
You're on mute.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I actually have the Excel spreadsheet open in front of me as we speak right now.
Are you able to share that? So if we were able to, just when I hear some of council talking and stuff like that, so, I've read through it, understand what the options and the reason you've picked option one and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But if we have the option where we can move some of the numbers and people see what it actually does and why it makes sense to go with, one of the four options listed, or, yeah.
First of all, which option would you like me to bring up for it to be zoomed in on? Because I've got all four here.
Right, so, again, my apologies. So previously, we had an Excel file that would come up and we'd be able to change it. Whether it was options or not, but we'd be able to change it as we move forward through it.
Yeah. Mayor, Council, yes, we can make changes. It's just that I've already pre-populated the four options already. So if you wanted to start from one of those as a base, then I can make the changes and we can see the impact on it. I just don't want to zoom in on something and you guys are wanting to look at something else as a base.
Can we just start with option one?
Okay.
I think that we can make the changes there, and that way we can see the differences that are being explained to us. I think seeing it live may help some of the dialogue. How big are you able to make it?
I can make it bigger, but I can't see much on it then. Hold on. How's that? We just have to slide it around though.
Yeah, we could. Miss Scott, are we able just to lower some of the lights?
Or,
I think that might help too.
and maybe if you can bold all of the print?
What do you want? Bold the print?
Yeah, everything, yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's still too small for my eyes.
Still too small.
I can hold my eyes. Can you see it or no? I can see some of it. Okay, can you make it just a tad bigger? Perfect. I can see it. Rest of the council, we're all good?
We can go off the lines here too.
Yeah, we can go off the file, but she'll be able to make changes and you'll be able to see the live effect if council wants to see it. Okay, Council Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. For my information moving forward, one of the questions that I have comes to the reserve that is brought up in option 1 and 3. It sounds to me like we do need to put like $5.1 million or 40% of whatever we collect from major industry into reserve. So like that's something we need to tax for. You know, anything above that seems like it's just going into a general reserve, which is something we don't need to tax for. You know what I mean? Like that's where I'm thinking. I don't want to tax our residents more than they have to, especially with this year. I'm trying to find any way to minimize the tax rates to them. So I guess my question to staff would be is, what is the minimum number we need to have put aside for reserve so we know that moving forward? I guess it's a moving number because it's going to change whatever our major industry is. So it's essentially $5-ish million.
I think it's based on what we collect.
Yeah.
Right, so like, I believe staff's mentioned that on option 1 with the 6 million, it was 5.1 million. And on option 3, when it was discussed, it was 6.7 million, that number went up, that had to go into the, tax stabilization reserve. So that's where that number will flux, is my understanding, but just get clarity from staff on that, is I believe it's based on those two numbers, the 6 million or in option 3 where it was 6.7. Obviously, 6.7, there would be a higher percent going into tax stabilization reserve. Ms. Scott?
Yeah, so I have the bylaw open in front of me that says the sum of 5 to 10% of Class 4 major industry taxation revenue shall be hereby contributed annually into a reserve fund to be utilized in the event of major industrial taxation revenues are substantially reduced from the prior year's taxation revenue due to facility closures or unforeseen circumstances. And so to provide greater clarification then on the amount of that 6 million that would be going into or should be going into that tax stabilization reserve. You know, instead of giving you wrong information, I'll ask the Director of Finance to provide that clarification.
Yeah, I was reading something that said 40% was what was recommended to go into the tax stabilization reserve. At 40%, I look at it being able to offset the difference in taxes. If, say, one of the mines closed down, you'd be able to sort of dovetail for probably 5-10 years afterwards till tax rates could slowly come up on one side and mitigate the losses on the other while maintaining your service level that you already currently have.
Okay, Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakaka, for the follow-up. There seems to be a bit of a difference in what our bylaw states versus what's being recommended. 40% of that class to be put aside, to me, seems like we're taxing our community at a higher rate than what we require and what's necessary. I mean, yeah, fair enough, planning ahead in the future, but how much? Yeah, I'm struggling with that.
Yeah. Councillor Hoffman?
Thank you, Mayor. My understanding, I guess, or trying to understand as an extension of Councillor Norbury, see that there's still 1.7%, I guess, shortfall, for lack of a better term, on options 1 and option 3, that there would be funds from 2026 to cover 2025's expenses, similar to what we did for this year, where I believe it was 3-point-something%. We used reserve funds to cover last year. So this 1.7%, is that the similar as last year, that we're using something other than taxation to cover the total, and that we'll be making up the shortfall next year at an expected 1.7%?
Ms. Scott?
I'll ask the Director of Finance to provide that clarification.
Through Mayor and Council, the 1.7% is, yes, included, but it's not coming out of operating reserve. It's coming from taxation. So you're collecting it as if you were collecting taxation. It's just reducing the amount of the non-market change in this case.
Okay.
Follow up?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. So to Councillor Norbury's point, we're concerned with overtaxing with what the rates are right now. So with this 1.7%, like with what you just described, I am falling short on understanding on how that fits in with our tax rate. What happens if we say we want to lower our tax rate to 8% across the board instead? Does this number go up, and that we'll have to make up for it, that we're making up for it in another way? I guess I'll leave it at that, as just to understand the relationship between the tax rate and this adjustment.
Ms. Scott?
Yeah, so again, I will ask the Director of Finance if she can clarify that.
Sorry, I lost you there for a second. Could you repeat that question for me, please?
No problem. I'm just trying to understand the relationship with the 1.7% in these two options. So my question was, in an effort to understand it, if we were to reduce the tax rate to 8%, what would be the impact on that 1.7? Would it go up roughly 10% or down roughly 10%, or is that not the relationship?
Yeah, so the 1.7% is, if it wasn't in place, that's where we'd have to have the 11.25%, which I think is option 2 or 3, option 2. Yes, option 2. So if the 1.7%, if you wanted to keep everything the same, no taxing for non-market change, that's where that 1.7 would have to come in through taxation, and to balance the budget, you'd be looking at 11.25% for all of the property classes except for utilities.
Okay, so my understanding of that is that if, even with doing 9%, that we're, for lack of a better term, a bit short, not a bit over, like we are not overtaxing at this rate, at 9%, that the 6.7 million that we're talking about is not a coming out of people's pockets to be put in reserved. It's a different function than just the tax rate. Wasn't a question, that's just me trying to talk it out and be clear in my own mind of what we're doing here. So I'm good. Thank you for your response.
Councillor Noxana?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the 6.1 million. I'm assuming that's 40% of industry tax. If we were to cut this down to the 5 to 10% that Ms. Scott has said was in policy, what does that look like for tax rates?
Ms. Scott? Oh, go, sorry. Okay.
Nope.
Ms. Scott?
Is that something that we can adjust in that spreadsheet? I'm also, I'm wondering, if we're talking about using that non-market change, that 6 million non-market change, to lower that 9% increase, I think kind of what you're talking about is potentially option 4, right? Which is where we said taxes aren't going to increase, we're going to use this non-market change to basically absorb that increase, but doing that then could potentially result in a 20% tax increase for 2026. But, and I think that, I kind of think that's what council's asking, but again, I'll ask the Director of Finance if maybe she's hearing that question different and has a different answer.
Mayor and Council, what I'm kind of hearing is you're not wanting to overtax. You want to tax for just the amount necessary that will make sure that there's money going into the stabilization reserve. But I also want to let you know this is a one-time only taxation thing that usually captures on the first year. So in this case, we're looking at it perpetuity. Yeah, there's a certain amount that will come forward throughout the rest of the years at the $5 million range. But outside of that, that would be a first year capture. Typically municipalities for non-market change, it's like a new subdivision, it's new inventory that's come in. And they typically tax based as if they didn't have the non-market change. And the reason for that is it's an opportunity to put money aside to help with the infrastructure that's required to provide a service moving forward, or refurbishment of things for the new subdivision or the new inventory that's come into the district.
Yeah, appreciate that. Ms. Scott, I'm going to ramble off kind of a thought process here. Maybe a little bit different than what staff is kind of mentioning about this market change. So we're talking probably about the quintet operation coming on board as a full active mine site. That has not been, previously we taxed it as an idle mine. I believe this is kind of what we're talking about here. So I think if we break it down and we talk about it that way, I think it might be easier to understand. So if they were paying $500,000 as a non-active mine site, my understanding, obviously, they're active. They've started at Little Windy. They've done some capital improvements at that operation. So the tax rate now would be different because they're coming on board as an operational mine site. So my understanding is we used to always get, you know, that $500,000, whatever that number was. I'm just going to use an easy number, $500,000, maybe fluctuate here and there with assessments and such. Now it's coming on board, it's going to go be assessed, and it's going to be up here, and in between here and there is $2.2 million. What we're saying is we tax that, but it actually goes directly into this into the tax stabilization reserve. Is that kind of what we're talking about?
I believe the answer is yes, that's what we are suggesting. And that way, you know, when one of the other mines maybe goes into idle mode and we lose that assessment, that it would balance out. But again, I'll ask the Director of Finance if she has anything additional that she might want to add to that.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, that's exactly where, and it doesn't necessarily have to go into a tax stabilization reserve. It still goes up to Council's discretion because there's things like the asphalt reserve, which has been utilized fully. There's a fire hall that could be utilized for those type of things. So that's a consideration before actually of where you would like that to go. Typically, I would recommend that you would put it into the amount for when, say, a mine goes. And in this non-market change, it also takes into account that light industry has gone down by $1 million. And that's part of like what the mayor was talking about, of it's now an active mine. So the assessment for light industry has gone down, and that for major industry has gone up. Yeah. And in this case, it's gone up significantly by about 50 million.
So with these options that are in front of us, my understanding, and please, if staff can clarify at the end, is instead of taking, you know, an onboarding mine that's coming on board, instead of saying, okay, we need $15 million to run a municipality. That's what our percent was. Here it is. But instead of saying we're taxing that individual major industry, and it's going to go right in to help our tax levy our taxes out, we're going to take that money and put it in the you know, whatever reserve it goes in, tax stabilization, asphalt, or whatever. But that is not going to go in to help offset the running of the municipality. We're going to use that as a buffer for when, if Wolverine decides to go to an idle mine, that year when that happens, we don't take a huge increase in taxation to residential tax, light, small business tax, light industrial, again, heavy industrial. Is that my understanding? Like, that's how I understand it. I just want to make sure that, I think that's a little clearer to understand. We're trying to protect the municipality for the downturn of industry.
And I believe that's what we're saying with our recommendation of option 1. And so again, I'll ask the Director of Finance to weigh in on that I believe that is why we are recommending option 1. But again, I'll ask the Director of Finance to weigh in as well.
Absolutely, that is exactly where we're looking at, is to put the money into a tax stabilization reserve. So yeah, if there's a downturn, that money can be utilized for all classes. It will help cover the cost that would have normally came in from major industry to make sure that there's not a spike in those other classes, which would be business or residential, those classes.
All right. Okay, so thank you for that. So my concept, I guess, then is we're saying let's do a 9% increase, obviously on residential, small business. I want to say light industrial, but I could be wrong here. Yeah, light industrial. What does that look like? So on an average home, 9%. What are we looking at? So we know assessments, we have them, we can Google. I mean, I'll be honest, use my address, I'm fine with that. I have no problem being public. What does that look like? Because that's to me, I think that's what council has to see, that we're looking at an extra $85 or $105 per the average home at estimated value, $280,000. I don't know if that helps council. Yeah, it looks like they're shaking heads. Because I understand what staff's saying. Instead of taking the money from, and I don't want to keep using the name of it, so of an industry coming on board to protect the municipality and the taxpayers in the future, is making sure we have some kind of buffer. So if we lose industry with, the downturn of coal, like knock on wood, or anything like that, we have a buffer that offsets the help for our residents, the help for our small business, the help for the light industrial, is my understanding. I just want to make sure I'm right. That's my understanding how that was just explained.
Yes, that is our intention with option one. I will ask the Director of Finance if she's able to give council a rough estimate of what a 9% increase might be on a home that's assessed at $250,000.
250, sure.
Mayor, council, I actually did one up for what the average assessment was for the community based on the amount. So if you look up on the screen right now, I'm sharing, unfortunately, it's a $203,000 home and the average cost of a condo. And the increase for the average family home is $97.54 for 2025. And the average condo would be $46.32 based on what I have calculated between 2024 and 2025.
And then the mandate in regards to tax increase was set fairly early on by council. I believe council even at that point knew that we did probably have some another major industry coming on board. We didn't know what that was going to look like. I mean, I don't even know if staff has seen that assessed tax rule, whether it's been fully done through BC assessment with the infrastructure that they've installed out there. Not aware yet, not sure. So I understand from staff side that, to me, this makes sense. We're looking at protect, and I believe previous councils and mayors and staff that were here at the time did the same thing when they built these reserves, to help with asphalt, to help with our sidewalks, to help with equipment. I think that's why these reserves back then was suggested, that this town was instantly built community by the province for mining, but knowing that everything was installed in Tumbler Ridge the same time, exactly. So we're gonna have, we've seen some water main breaks and stuff. So to me, the previous councils have already started realizing back then that, let's save when it's good times for when it's bad times. And I think that councils and those mayors back then, I think they had it on definitely on the radar. I think this council and stuff like that when we discuss, and that's why I tried to use an industry, because that's my understanding is what they were trying to explain. That once we get a buffer, and I think that conversation should be had, that if this tax stabilization reserve, if we hit a target number, if this is the number that should be targeted in there that could run the municipality for the 3 years or 4 years, that once we hit that number, we're not doing that anymore. And I see it says further down in the report that I read that next year we don't see a huge increase in regards to residential and small business and light industrial, but heavy industrial looks like they will see an increase. That's what's in the report. I guess that could change as we work through 2026. You never know what comes in the future of that. But that is my understanding of it. I just want to make sure clear as mud from staff that makes sense what I'm saying, that's what staff is proposing to us.
Yes.
Okay. Councilor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. I mean, I definitely see the value of saving for a rainy day, essentially, right? Like we saw what happened. You and myself were on council when we did have a downturn, but our taxes didn't drop to zero. Even in the years where it was getting pretty dicey, 2 years after mine shut down, we were still bringing in taxation. We were still bringing in $10 million in taxes, $12 million in taxes. So it's not like we have to cover the entirety of taxation through reserves. So I definitely appreciate the mayor's comments in regards to, how much should we put aside? Say industry, say we have a downturn in industry, how much do we need per year for 4 years, 3 years until things come back online? Because realistically, it's cyclical, right? We've traditionally seen it go for a few years and come back. The last downturn was about 2.5, 3 years until we saw Canooma open, and you know, I'm very thankful that we didn't have to make any very hard decisions. So just the number that was chosen, $6 million was just chosen. I appreciate that's a number, but what brought us to that number? That's where I'm struggling with. The bylaw says 10%, so that should be, and you know, we have 40%, so this should be, you know, a thirded, so we should be putting $15 million away. You know, so I'm struggling with that because we're adding on this tax. We already have a high taxation year. You know, so that's one comment. And my other comment is in that our last term, we did not have equal tax increases across the board. We tried to thread the needle. 2 here, 4 here, 0, 1, 2, blah, blah, blah. And one thing I did learn through that process, people just want equality across the board. They want everybody pay the same. So my concern with option 1 is not everyone's paying the same. Not everyone's paying their way, in my opinion. You know, our community was built to encapsulate industry to help offset the cost to our town, so it's not all on residential and businesses. And it's been successful. Now, my issue with option 3 is that everyone pays the 9, but we're overtaxing, in my opinion. We're overtaxing by collecting $6.7 million to put into reserve because that was the number that was chosen. And I have no doubt that is, you know, that's a good number we can put aside. That's where I'm struggling, in that I just can't say yes to 9 to all but major. I can't say yes to 9 all. I would prefer to see something across the board, say 7, and then we put in $4 million. And that's just, I'm just making those numbers up because I don't even know exactly what they look like. So I definitely am looking forward to the exercise of us changing taxation on the sheet to see what that looks like. Thanks.
Ms. Scott, that would be the mill rate, I believe, that you're talking about, the percents and changing. Again, we used to have a pie chart, and we were able to move those numbers around, you know, instead of whatever the percent is right now on heavy industrial, we up it by 0.5. We take it off residential by 0.5. We add an extra 1.5 to business and stuff like that. That's what we're talking about, and I understand we have, you know, new staff, new CAO, new CFO. Maybe we can just get, you know, I think staff heard, you know, some of the conversation and comments, not really a question. I guess one of the questions is how do we come up with that? This is the 6 million that we want, or we want the 6.7 million. I guess how did that number get picked? I guess that's one of the conversations Councillor Number had mentioned. Is there how we come up with that number?
I will ask the Director of Finance to provide that clarification.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, the $6.1 million wasn't actually a number that was decided upon as a number that we needed. What was done is non-market change, which typically comes in. You keep the tax rate the same beforehand. So you look at what the industry was paying, what was their mill rate prior, how much they were collecting, and utilize that for going forward for the non-market change value. So it just happened to come out to $6.1 million. But what it was is we've maintained the mill rate for major industry.
What's their mill rate, if I may, Ms. Scott?
The mill rate for the major industry is it was, their mill rate would have dropped down to 51.25 based on the non-market change. But if without the non-market change, it was 122.77.
Thank you. Going to go to Councillor Julik and then to Councillor Hoffman.
I'm ready to make a motion. I guess what I would say is that I think that the reasoning and explanations from staff is sound. I appreciate the information in the report. I do remember back when the mines closed down, there was a lot of concern on behalf of council, particularly when PRC I don't remember all of the details, but I remember PRC did something that made it so our taxes were quite a bit lower, and that kind of made everybody stop and take a breath. So I'm, after all of the conversation, I'm ready to make a motion, but I'm willing to hold off on that as well, but I am absolutely in favor of option one. I think that's why we have our staff and their expertise. And, like I said, I think the reasoning is sound and all the answers make me lean that way.
Okay, thank you. Let me just go to Councillor Hoffman here. Councillor Hoffman?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you waiting a minute, Councillor Julik. Councillor Norby's point on fairness, kind of resonates. Like, I don't know what the exact right balance is between. I think we can have that conversation again. But to put a 0 on one group, especially when we don't know what next year does hold. I mean, we as a council shot for 9% this year. We've shot on that. We went for that based on a choice we made for last year's budget with the idea of looking forward to this year's budget. And I find I'm okay with it. I appreciate the explanations tonight. I see where we are. The non-market change, thanks for that education. I think leaving that out and seeing what it looks like next year is just a reasonable choice given the circumstances. And I am struggling with a 0% for one group and a 9% on all the other groups. I hear the explanations. They sound rational. Like, I don't want to argue that point, but that's a hard one to, I think, explain to everybody. I have no problem explaining the roughly $100 increase. I mean, we looked at this last year of what other towns of relatively similar size and situation are paying for property taxes. I think the town's in great shape on that front. I am really hoping to not do 9% next year. That was kind of part of the plan to do it this year and last year. So I guess I'm asking for help to help me choose one over the other for the rest of council on what you're sort of feeling about that 9%, and then I'm ready to hear the motion and go from there.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Norbury, sorry.
Thanks, Mayor Kakalka. We all get to eat it a little bit, right? My hair's not quite as long. What would it look like if we had, say, 7% increase to all classes, including non-market change assessments? What would that look like? Because we're looking between non-market change assessments, excluding non-market change assessments. Would we still have $6 million put aside if we did 7% across, including non-market change assessments?
Scott, were we able to do?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, and I'll ask the Director of Finance also to weigh in. With option one, we're not proposing, it's not a 0% increase to major industry, it's a 0% increase to non-market assessment. So if they had market assessment change, they would still be seeing an increase as well. The 0% is only a non-market assessment change. But again, I'll ask the Director of Finance to weigh in on that as well, and ask if she is able to, in the spreadsheet we have up there, if she can, if she's able to show what that 7% increase would look like as opposed to the 9% increase.
Yeah, the 0% would be definitely on the non-market. The rationale for the 0% is that major industry is going to be paying a significant larger portion because of the non-market change. So the new inventory coming on, but they will be paying their same tax rate on the amount beforehand. Now, if you were going to look at the 7% across the board, I haven't had a chance to do the numbers quite yet, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, 40% would be the highest we could go for that. Utilities. It would bring in, if it was created across the board, $6.6 million with non-market change at 7% increase.
Thank you, Mayor, for giving me that opportunity. Thank you for coming up with the answer so quickly, Ms. Weiner, because that's what I'm looking for. If we could bring it to our residents that we're not going to go with that 9%. We could probably squeeze it down to 6%, but that's what I'm looking at. Equality across the board, because it's an easy thing for everyone to swallow, and it makes sense. Everyone's paying their share. I can appreciate that. Yeah, we have industry has new assets, but you have new assets, your values go up, your taxes go up. It just makes sense to me. Now, I'm not trying to pick on anybody. That's why I'm trying to be equal across the board and fair. And I've had to learn that lesson the hard way when we kept taxes low. But people recognize that if it's not taxed fairly, you have to make up for a little bit later, which I don't think we have in this case. We're putting aside a healthy amount, but that's where I'd be leaning towards. I'd be leaning towards option 1, but a 7% increase too. Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion. Nope.
Well, you can. I just got a comment before you
More
make it.
comments.
'Cause-
Fair enough. Yep.
Yeah, and I get it, we're starting to throw numbers out here, 7% and everything else, and I'm pretty sure everybody's well aware of the P&G delivery rates in Tumbler Ridge. We've had P&G here twice already for a delegation. When you increase those delivery rates go up. So we're saying we're trying to be fair across the board. So we'll do 7% across the board. I think what that does is we see an increase in delivery charges for gas. Because if they get a higher cost to them for taxation for their pipelines, they have to also get their money back. And, that is one of the things that, working with PG and asking that is that there's costs there because of their, we're not an easy accessible for gas distribution. We pull it in from quite a ways in regards to where the fields are compared to some of the other communities around. Sure, he explained how their rates are going to go up and everything else, but the delivery charges, he really didn't get too into it because I don't think they're fully aware on that. So I think when we start increasing right across the board and stuff, and we think we're being fair, and I don't disagree with Councilor Norbury when he says that, but the same aspect we've heard from every resident of this community about their delivery charges for P&G is one comment that we hear on a regular basis. I pay, $350 in delivery charges, but I only use $95 in fuel. Because they're being taxed on a infrastructure that they have to get back. Is my understanding on that assessed value of it. I believe that's why we see a difference in some of the assessed value when it comes to light industrial, that it's down by 1 point something million, is because of all the closed-in pipes they've done. They've closed in a bunch of infrastructure because it was being taxed and they weren't using that amount of gas, so they closed those lines in. So then you can't tax on that. So like an idle infrastructure. So I'm not saying I don't disagree with Councilor Norbury about the 7%, but when we talk about being fair, what does this do to a delivery charge at P&G? I got Councilor Julick and then Councilor Norbury.
Yeah, and I think for me, what makes me comfortable with keeping 9% for across the board besides major industrial is that major industry is already funding 60% of our total taxation. It's a pretty big number. And if we tax our major industry, who tend to be some major employers, that's not good for the community either, I don't think. And I'm perfectly willing to say, do I get all of this information? No. What I do understand is that we have some pretty great staff and this is what they're recommending. And so I'm still comfortable with this. So I'm actually going to make a motion that council approve option 1 where all property classes are increased by 9% with the exception of major industry, which will be 0%.
Seconder. Councilor Hoffman. Discussion. Councilor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. I can't support the motion on the floor. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to, so I had a question in regards to some of your comments. P&G, I was under the impression it's light industry. Is P&G in the major industry or the light industry class? Can we have clarification on that?
I believe they would be utility. No? Okay, then I will ask the Director of Finance if she can provide that clarification.
Mayor, Council, I don't have that information in front of me right at this moment. I could look it up for you and go from there, but I don't have it exactly in front of me.
Okay, 5-minute recess. The special meeting of council back to order. Ms. Scott, I'm just curious if staff was able to get that information for council.
Able to find that information for council.
Yes, the majority of the properties were Class 2 utilities. One was Class 6.
Thank you for that response. It's very useful in our deliberations in that, you know, we are still going to be, the cost of the commodity of natural gas is going to remain constant. We can't affect that. So I can appreciate the mayor's comments in regards to passing along the costs to consumers, because I think that's something that we do definitely need to be cognizant of. But this taxation scheme doesn't affect that, because we're still going to have taxes. My preferred option of across the board will not affect people's rate increase for natural gas because that is taxed. And for me, it goes back to everyone paying their fair share. So, I mean, I can't support it on what's on the floor, as I believe that one tax class is not paying the fair share that we all are. I mean, we're all in it together. We all share the burden, and I just want to see that across all taxes. So I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knoxon and Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you. I'm also not in favor of the motion on the floor. I'm not sure. I think we need an equal balance because everything in life isn't equal, but there has to be some sort of balance between increases. It can't all be on residential. It can't all be on heavy industrial. There has to be something taken on by all of us. And I'm not against putting money in reserves for those rainy days, because we all know that they've happened in the past and we want to be prepared if they do happen in the future. But perhaps $6 million this year is more than we need. Maybe we could look at something like 4 or 5, hoping next year then that we build that up in future years.
Thank you. Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you, Mayor. As I said earlier, struggling between option 1 and option 3 myself, and I can justify both. The proportion of the tax burden on heavy industry is by far the highest of any group in the district. So if we don't increase them at the same rate this year as everybody else, they still are going to be the largest group. And I can also see the argument of everybody sort of takes the same step up. I think our tax rates and what we're putting in is low for a town. To do a second year of 9%, I am actually okay with. I would prefer to take 9% this year and find out that we can do a minimal increase next year than cut it this year and do an even higher rate again next year. We went through this last year. I think this is in line with what we were talking about and the direction we gave to staff. And I think staff's done a good job. That 1.7, I think, is less to make up next year than we made up with the 3-point-something% this year. So I'm going to support this motion on the floor right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Scott, if we can just get clarity from staff when they said one was a Class 6 in regards to that. Can we hear who is in Class 6? Just because I don't disagree with Councillor Nobre saying how our commodity increase won't happen because that's under the Utilities Commission. But I do not think that we would not see an increase to delivery charges as if an industry that is supplying the demand through lines out in the fields, that increase I would think would go to the end user. But if we can just get who's the class that is in Class 6.
So I'll ask the Director of Finance if she can provide that information about which business was the Class 6.
Mayor, Council, that one is, it says number 119 commercial park, and it's got an assessed value of 134,000.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, so. Okay, is there any other discussion? I'm going to make a couple comments. I think we've had a great open debate. Everybody's weighed into it, given some opinions and stuff like that. I understand from probably all sides of council, but the same aspect. I believe last year we talked about this, and it was take from reserves, and this is the year that we wouldn't do that, and we knew there was going to be a tax increase. And I believe all this council understood that. Moving forward by majority ruling on taking out of the reserves for last year to try to fluctuate that. I think we set a mandate for staff, I believe not just for staff, but elected officials, because we also cut our elected officials' budget down, travel budget and all that, to make sure we were in line with the increase that we'd set. I believe staff has worked very hard in regards to bringing this forward. And I think I understand, like with option one, I think staff is giving the answers as thoroughly and that as they could in the reasoning on where they sat there and in regards to the non-market changes. Doesn't mean that there's won't be increases on the other side. It's only on the non-market changes. So I do believe that when we talk about heavy or major industry, that there still is an increase there on the side of it. That's what I've heard from staff. So we can just get clarity on that part, that it's not, that there's no increase at all. The increase is just not on non-market changes from staff. Ms. Scott?
Yeah, that is my understanding, that if there is market change on major industry, that they would still have a tax increase. But again, I will ask the Director of Finance to provide that clarification.
You're on mute.
Sorry, because of the assessment going up, because of the market rates, the assessed value actually has dropped a little bit. So yes, the 0% means they're not paying a higher rate than they would have paid if they had done it last year. So they would be collecting based on the same rate, based on the market value for 2025. So if nothing had changed, they'll be at 0. So it's a 0% increase for both sides of the equation.
Right. We're just going to collect the same amount of money for major industry.
It will collect the same amount of, we will collect based on the same rate. We'll get more money from major industry because of the non-market change, because there's a larger value that we're going to be hitting with the same rate.
Okay. Thank you for the clarity. Because Diane was going to argue the motion that didn't make sense, but now it makes sense. So we're going to see it. We are going to see more dollars from major industry because of the assessments going up. We're just not adding the extra percent to them. When I look at what their mill rate is, what they actually contribute to the community, and I understand that they were, the reason Tumbler is here is because of mining. It was because of coal seams that were found within the area. I actually support the motion on the floor. I believe this was our mandate to staff. I believe my understanding last year when we debated taxes, my understanding is all the council was aware of 2025, what was going to happen because of what happened by taking money out of the reserves to offset the tax base, because we weren't prepared to see the increase last year. So knowing that we took a fairly large amount of money out of reserves to offset taxes for residential and such, that had to come back onto the taxation this year. So that's why I support it. We knew by doing that last year, this is what we're going to see this year. And that's actually explained further down too, that if we did option 4, it would be a huger tax increase in 2026 because of offsetting it from this year. So now we have 2 years to pay back. I look at when they talk that with doing this, that we should see that next year it looks like a lower tax rate for our, I mean, I'm going to say residential taxes and stuff, but until that comes forward, but we're not going to see that 9% or whatever that is prescribed for this year, and even last year was even higher, and we offset it. So at this point, I will be supporting the motion on the floor. Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. You commented on, we took money out of reserves. We took $170,000 out of reserve, I believe. It was originally $300,000, then we cut that back because we weren't comfortable. This proposition and other propositions are putting $6 million back. So I don't think it's that argument. We're giving back what we took. many, many times over. I'm not going to do the math. I'm not going to try and do the math real quick. 10 times. We're putting back more than we took, well above. Yeah, the taxes in the major industry are going up because their values have gone up. If I buy a second house, of course I'm going to pay more taxes. That's fine. And I don't think that I should be exempt from having to pay increases in taxes when every other tax class has to. We're not talking just residential. We're talking businesses. We're talking light industry. We're talking one single class is getting a freebie because they increase their non-market values, because they're going to make more money having an operational increase. So I just can't support it. Thanks.
Yep, makes sense. If I just get clarity from staff, I know Councilor Norby had asked for the 7%, and I couldn't see the number, but I know staff had read it out. Could they just read out the number if it was 7% across the board? I think it was 6.7, but I could have been wrong what I heard.
Yeah, I can't read it, so I'll ask the Director of Finance if she can read that out.
Yeah, it's 6.614 million, if it's 7% all across the board. So yeah, it's option 4 and 7 across for everyone but utilities.
But with that option, it talks about later on that this would result in a 16 to 20% tax increase for 2026. Sorry, Councilor Oksana?
I think you're looking at option 4 for the increase.
Yeah, no, I am. I think that, well, it was just mentioned by staff that was option 4. That was like the concept of option 4. But we're actually collecting more than we would be in option 1. Ms. Scott, did staff not just say that 7% across the board is like option 4?
I will ask the Director of Finance to clarify.
Mayor and Council, yes. If it was, it's like option 4, but you just drop the rate down to 7%.
Okay, so just clarity, would we be looking at that huge increase in 2026 then? 16 and 20% tax increase for 2026? So I'm just trying to get clarity. I'm just trying to get clarity on that. Sorry, I apologize, because we talk about $6 million in option 1 with not doing any taxation to major industry. I keep saying heavy industry, but major industry. So I'm just trying to, it's to me, I just want to make sure it's clear as mud. If there's no motion on the floor except for option 1 at this time that was put on by Councillor Julich and seconded by Councillor Hoffman. But one of the comments from Councillor Norbury was 7% across the board. You mentioned that it would bring in 6.614 million. Option 1 says 6 million. I think you said it was 6.1 earlier. But then you just made a comment, or staff made comment, and I apologize the way I'm talking to your staff, Ms. Scott, my apologies. But then you say that that would be like option 4, but with just a different number in it. My concern, would this result in a 16 to 20% tax increase for 2026 if we did option 4? Or the 7% across the board, not option 4.
So I will ask the Director of Finance if she can comment on if we went with 7% across the board, what that may look like as a tax increase for 2026.
Mayor, Council, I wouldn't expect it to be that high of an increase as if the assessments all stayed the same. If there was a major shift in the assessments, then it could have an impact on the district. So if, say, major industry went down significantly, that I cannot guarantee that there wouldn't be a larger increase.
Okay. So Ms. Scott, option 4 says a 0% tax increase on all property classes. We're saying 7% across the board increase.
Oh.
Does that not change the comment? Like, it says 0%. Councilor Norbury's comment wasn't a motion, it wasn't an amendment. It was 7% across the board, not 0. I just want to make sure council has an opportunity to have all that information to make sure we're making the right decision one for the residents of the community, the businesses of the community, and the heavy or major and light industrial. Like, that's a big task to make sure we get it right.
So my understanding, and I'll ask the Director of Finance again, my understanding then, if we did the 7% across the board instead of the 0% across the board, it could potentially reduce the amount of the increase for 2026, but it's hard to gauge how much without knowing the exact assessment information. So again, though, I'll ask the Director of Finance to, if she has any additional information to share on that.
Actually, I'm sorry, Council, I misled you. It's actually option 3 that I was showing you. With the 7%.
Okay. Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor Takaka. So to clarify, option 1, we would still need a 1.7% increase in 2026 to cover the costs. Option 3, with a 7% across the board, including our market change, would also still require 1.7. So we'll still need to catch up a little bit, but yeah, I guess that's step 1.
Can we just get clarity?
Am I correct?
So if we're not collecting the 9% and we're collecting the 7%, then that 1.7% for 2026 would have to go up, I believe. But again, I'll ask the Director of Finance to clarify that.
No, it just means less money would be going into reserves at this point in time. So if you are reducing the rate, it means less funds that will go into reserves. With the option of the 7% for all, it's a decrease from the original plan of 9% on option 3, but it's significantly more than option 1. So that is the difference between them. So the 1.7% is being taken care of out of the amount that will be transferred to reserve. So for future tax stabilization.
Follow up? I wonder if we're getting a little, and I know there's a motion on the floor. I'm just wondering if we're getting a little confused here. So in option 3, we're going to use what's on the front of the paper. I think it might be a little easier. It says, if we were to do that option, it would be $6.7 million transferred into reserves. Right?
Yes.
Thank you. If we did 7% across the board, using option 3, so not 9%, but 7%, including, so right across the board, including the major industry, that is 6.614. So we're a tad short compared to 6.7, $400,000. So instead of putting 6.7 million transferred to reserves, it would be 6.6. So we're $100,000 short compared to what option 3 is, but we're taxing it straight across the board. Would we still be looking at about a 1.7? Maybe it's 1.9 in 2026.
I will ask the Director of Finance to provide that information.
Mayor and Council, based on the information that we have right now, it would be just reducing the amount moving forward going into the reserve. So it's not, if you wanted to increase the amount to put it back up to how much you want to go into reserve, then yes, it would be an increase of 1.7%. If you are okay with putting less into the reserve fund, then you don't have to increase the taxes.
Okay, thank you. Who picks the number that goes into reserves?
I believe this was a question that was asked previously, and I think the answer was this was just the number basically based on our recommendation. But again, I'll ask the Director of Finance to provide that clarification.
The amount that's potentially going into the reserves would be the $6.6 million that council could choose, make the selection to go into the reserve.
Yeah, no, Ms. Scott, I fully understand that. What I would like to know, so what if council decided right now that we only want to tax to have $5 million for reserves? I think that was a question asked earlier. I don't think we got really, it's where does this number come for reserves? Do we have policies? Resolutions? I just want to make sure that we're following whatever previous councils have put into play, and I know there's definitely some. But how do we pick the number on what we want to tax to have for reserves? And we always want to have some reserve money because you never, you want the rainy days. We've talked about it, and it seems like, all of council, Councilor Judik's mentioned it too, we all understand that. But who picks that number that goes into reserves?
So
Or
again,
how is it picked? I shouldn't say who, how.
so I'll ask the Director of Finance again to clarify where that $6 million number came from.
That $6 million number wasn't a number that was decided. It was a number that came out by maintaining the tax rate for major industry that is on the non-market change. And it gives council the opportunity in the first year to collect some extra funds that they could be utilizing on the projects that they have coming, such as tax stabilization, in case the part of the mill shuts down. You could look at utilizing it for potentially the paying part and not having to borrow funds for the fire hall, or to put funds back into the asphalt. It's one of those opportunities that come at the very first year of a non-market change. So it wasn't a number decided at, it was more of maintaining what they're currently paying, the rate they're currently paying at.
Okay, thank you, and on how that number came into the scenario. Just before we go to other councilors, next year, will there be a non-market change in assessment? Possibly, I know staff will say, well, could be, we really don't know. Let's talk major industry. Does it look like we have one? So like, I believe the non-market change is because of an onboarding of a major industry, is my understanding this year. If we didn't have that next year, we wouldn't have that option next year.
I believe that's what the Director of Finance is saying, but I'll ask her to provide that clarification.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. The reason for the non-market change is the major change in major industry. Now, if you were to keep tax rates the same as they have been in the past, say for major industry, and not take into consideration the non-market change next year, if you wish to go and collect those funds, it would be a huge spike in the tax rates.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, and I appreciate it. We don't know, in regards to non-market changes next year, could there be some? We never know. There's other, obviously major industries that could come on board that, are waiting for permits and stuff, but we don't know about that in major, and there could be something else that comes that we don't know, but it's not a guarantee. So I understand where staff has said, that here's an option to get some funds for the rainy day if some of our major industry had effects on them with markets and stuff like that, that the community is protected. So now I think it's a little bit more clear for me. Councillor Hoffman and Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor. We've muddled up the waters already, so I think there's an aspect of fairness that we brought up, is how much do we want from a particular group? And when we're already 60% with one group, I like the idea, which was one of staff's comments earlier, of lowering that number, lowering the reliance on it. No guarantees. I like the idea of treating this as a one-time thing and going from there. Yeah, we can do a whole lot with it, but we already know we've got asphalt coming, we've got sidewalks coming. I heard some worries about certain plumbing in town. All of it's coming, and it's not $6 million. It's going to be a whole lot more than that over the coming years. Our residents are not paying nearly as much per household as a whole lot of other towns in BC. We're among the lowest. I think this is an opportunity to start to close that gap and to actually fund ourselves year to year reasonably. And this break, if you will, just helps it across the board. I mean, I know we all like lower taxes, but we went through this fight last year and we planned for it this year. I see no reason not to do what was recommended for us. And I hope to say the number next year is 4% or 5% or something right around inflation. I would much rather do that than say 7% this year and then go back to 9 next year, because we have to make up. So I'd rather say 9 this year and 7 next year than the other way around. So I appreciate the clarification all around. I really do. This was not what I thought I was reading when I first read it. So that's good. But I think we, as a town, as a council, have an opportunity here to set ourselves up well going forward for the next few years. And I'll take the $100 a year for my household plus and go forward. So I'm still very much in support of option one. And the degree here, I just want to thank staff. A lot of information and a little different than last year, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. I understand Councillor Hoffman's comments about our how much industry pays in taxes, and that's why the town was built very specifically for this exact purpose. Other communities they're asking to emulate what we have because they have such small boundaries. Tumbler Ridge was developed in the 80s because it was known to be an industry town. And with the industry in the area, it's our opportunity to have them help us have a community, which is our job, have a community to support everybody who lives here, which is, let's be honest, a lot of it is their employees. Now, without that support, we aren't able to support the usage that their employees bring to our community. The amount of people that are coming in, we need to support. That's what we're going to do with these taxes. That's what we do with these taxes. And we can say that, thank you very much. Your employers in these tax classes do subsidize your taxes so that we can have a great community. And let's be honest, we have some of the best snow clearing. We have soon to be brand new sidewalks. We have great asphalt. We have great grass cutting and all the work's done in the summertime. And that's why the taxation is the way it is. And this isn't just last council. This has been councils all along, and they recognize that. And let's be honest, the tax increase to major industry, that is not putting onto the residents, that just goes onto a commodity cost. That goes on to the cost of steel in Southeast Asia to build skyscrapers. We're not talking about direct costs to our residents. By not having these regular tax increases on those classes, all we're doing is saying to our residents, you're going to have to pay more because the cost of steel is, 0.1% less per 100 feet, right? Like that's why we have the opportunity to tax these classes. Thanks.
Thank you. Any more discussion? Okay, motion on the floor is that council approve option one where all property classes are increased by 9% with the exception of major industry, which will be 0. Going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Noxana and Councillor Norbury opposed. Motion carries. Second recommendation. I'm assuming they need that.
Yes.
Motion 3? No, it's just motion 3. Councillor Hoffman?
That the mill rate be calculated excluding non-market change assessment changes.
Seconder? Councillor Julik, discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. District of Tumbler Ridge 2025-2029 Financial Plan, bylaw number 749, 2025. Report dated April 23rd, 2025 from the Chief Financial Officer regarding the District of Tumbler Ridge 2025-2029 Financial Plan, bylaw number 749, 2025. I'll take recommendations one at a time. Councilor Norbury?
Thank you, Mayor. The council gives first reading of the District of Tumbler Ridge 2025 to 2029 Financial Plan, bylaw number 749, 2025.
Seconder, Councilor Dussault. Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Recommendation number 2, Councilor Noxana.
The council gives second reading of the District of Tumbler Ridge 2025-2029 Financial Plan Bylaw number 749, 2025.
Seconder, Councilor Hoffman. Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Recommendation number 3, Councilor Dussault.
That council gives the third reading of the District of Tumbler Ridge 2025-2029 Financial Plan Bylaw Number 749, 2025.
Seconder, Councillor Noxana. Discussion? This is the opportunity, if somebody is not happy with the way the mill rates are set, this is the opportunity to do it, as if we pass the third reading. To make any changes at the next meeting, we'd have to remove the third reading to do it back to the second. Can I call the question? All in favor? Carried. Lions Flatbed Campground Agreement, report dated April 23rd, 2025, from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding Lions Flatbed Campground. Recommendation. Just need to get to my page, please. Yeah. Oh, man, there we go. Councillor Noxana.
That council authorized the mayor and the CAO to sign the agreement with the Tumbler Ridge Lions Club for operation of the Flatbed Campground.
Seconder. Councillor Julik. Discussion. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kikaka. I was hoping we can open up discussion about the Lions' request to change the wording from net to gross. Currently, we're going to be charging in gross, and they've specifically asked for net, as that's been the practice that they have been following since 2011 under their understanding of the discussed agreement at the time.
Yeah, it's open for discussion. Councillor Noxana.
Thank you. I would agree that doing this change for the Lions makes sense. This is an agreement they've been under for over a decade, or thought that they were under for over a decade. And all of this revenue that the Lions make comes back into our community. It is for our residents, whatever way you look at it. The Lions is a long-standing group in our community, and this is a request they've directly asked for. So I'm happy to vote down this motion and ask for changes to their lease agreement.
Okay, any more discussion? Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be concerned about making the motion, approving it without making an amendment to change that wording, because we're saying that yes to the whole thing. So I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that we change the fee structure to 20% of net revenues for the operating agreement.
Okay, seconder on the amendment, Councillor Noxana. Discussion? I'm going to make a couple comments. I don't know if an 80-20 split is doable, even in regards to the net revenues. It's not that I disagree with it. I don't. You know, I believe in, you know, I'll say I believed it at the time that I was a non-elected official and I was just a Lions member, that it was it was out of the net revenue. I've been proven differently reading through contracts, and I think maybe back then it was because of, and don't get me wrong, Lions do an amazing job for this community. But to me, I think we need to look at something else. I think we need to look at a different thing, 60-40. I believe that, yes, they give a lot of money back to our community and everything else. And to me, if we're going to stay at 80-20, which I'm fine with, if that's council's decision, that we do a grant and aid or a fee for service. I think we need to be very transparent to our residents. I mean, last year, you know, I think we need to get some firmer numbers or whatever, making sure that we're GLing it out properly too, that we know what the actual expenses are, that, you know, we're not just throwing out the number of 34,000 or 35,000 and here's the breakdown, like new picnic tables, new that, but whose capital is that? That's not the Lions' capital. So is that, you know, I understand why it's GL'd out to the Lions, to the Lions Flatbed Campground, but that is a district-owned park being operated by a non-for-profit group. So can those picnic tables, instead of being jailed under that, so that it shows that this was a cost to that operator, including Monkman RV Park, that they're GL'd out under in another GL, but obviously being transparent about why they're under that GL. So to me, I think we need to make sure we have the clear numbers so that we know that what the cost is to the taxpayer. When we just do this and all, you know, last year was 18 grand or 13 grand, the year before was 23 grand, and such like that. Really and truly, what we're doing here is we're giving money to the Lions Club of Taxation to give out grant and aid on our behalf. To me, that's how I look at it. I could be wrong, maybe staff can clarify for me on that comment, but to me, my understanding is that last year there was a loss. I mean, I know the number was fairly high, but again, there was picnic tables and such. But with not doing all revenues, and it's just off the net revenue, is in turn, that taxation dollars is really being given out from the Lions Club, but on behalf of the DTR, because it's actually taxation. So whether those are grant needs that people should be applying for through the DTR through our policies or not, I 100% support the Lions, but I'm just wondering that maybe we should be looking at a different split with making sure that we give some direction to staff to have a discussion with Lions so that we have a bit more tracking. Whether that's some financial stuff that's not being submitted that maybe we could change so that we can actually track it. And, you know, I don't think we put a year to this. I'm more in favor to make sure we have a timestamp on this, that it's a 1 year so we can get some background information so we can get this back into council in the fall to have a better look, because, you know, listening to the delegation last night, well, we can't afford the lease option that we gave direction to staff to start a draft, spent quite a few hours, my understanding, on staff time and such like that. But I believe there's other options that they weren't unaware of, you know, like the tax exemption that they could apply for. And then they would only be paying for emptying out the sanity dump down by the bathroom facilities, because the other one is a public sanity dump. So to me, why would we charge for the one up top that I can come in from Gwillow Lake and dump in there instead of going down by the transfer station? So those would be my comments. I just wonder, you know, in regards to the amount that we seen last year and the previous years, that they're really just giving out funds on behalf of council. And I understand that they do a great job, don't get me wrong, but they're giving out, like, you know, let's use $20,000 last year, $25,000. They're giving it out on behalf of council. Ms. Scott, I just want to confirm that, like, the comment there about the funds would be like a grant and aid or a fee for service.
Essentially, the way it works out is that the District of Tumbler Ridge, or the taxpayers of the District of Tumbler Ridge, are subsidizing the operations of the campground, which would increase their profits that they then disperse to the community.
Okay, thank you. I got Councillor Noxana, then Councillor Julik.
Thank you. I appreciate all your comments, but Flatbed Campground is an asset to our community, and we're kind of down to the wire here. The hope is to open this May 12th, I think was the comment yesterday. And we've had a year, most of a year, to work on this, and we're down to the wire trying to make these decisions. Whether we issue a year lease or offer a year operating agreement, whatever it is, we need to figure out what direction we want to take and get these accurate numbers and get this done in 2 weeks. I'm not sure we have time, and I'm not sure what the answer is, because the Lions do an excellent job down at the campground, and it's going to cost the district a heck of a lot more money to operate it ourselves, especially if you think of the improvements the Lions Club has done over the years. There's no way the District of Tumbler Ridge could have done any of that cheaper. So we're going to have to make a decision and figure it out real quick.
Yeah, so I want to be honest, I'm not saying holding this up. So if you got that from me, my comments, that's not what I'm looking for or making suggestions of. It's the concept that I think we need to make sure that we, you know, have staff work with the Lions to make sure we're getting all the proper information back in from them, like financial stuff and that, and then a district from our side that we're properly tracking stuff and it's properly GL'd out, and that we're not charging for the upper part of the sand dump and we're only charging for the bottom one, because the upper one is a public sand dump. I mean, anybody uses it. I know I used it myself when I camped at Gwillimert Moose Lake. So I'm not looking at holding it up. I did make comments about, are we right that it's an 80-20? Should it be 60-40? I did make that, and that can be decided tonight. I'm not looking at holding them up. When we had a year, I believe staff been working really, really hard, and all of a sudden they got information that they didn't want to proceed with a lease and they wanted to come before council. So I think staff's worked very hard on that. Councillor Julik and then Councillor Dussault.
Yeah, I agree with what you've said, Mayor Kakauka. I think that however we go forward, I feel like this has kind of gotten in the weeds a bit with just the understanding from the Lions and the conversations back with the district. I'm happy to go ahead for a year while we straighten it all out so that they can meet their May 12th opening date. I'm even happy to keep it at 20% of net for this year. Because my concern and what I was going to say before any of this other discussion took place is that I think that this year has to be one where everybody's dotting their I's and crossing their T's. It sounds like there's been miscommunication on the Lions side. There's been misunderstanding between the district and the Lions, and we need to make sure we're all on the same page. However, we're going to go ahead with this lease. I agree with Councillor Noxana. We've kind of left it to the wire. I agree with Mayor Kalka. That wasn't the case. I know staff shifted gears in the middle of it at the request of the Lions. So we can point all the fingers we want. Where we're at is a campground that needs to open. And so whatever motion we have on the floor, I'm willing to change to a year lease because I did kind of quickly look to see what it said in the lease, if it was a 3-year lease with a 2-year extension or what it was. But I'm happy to do a 1-year lease with 20% of net and then make sure we get all our ducks in a row so that this fall we can do whatever we need to maybe extend that lease.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dussault and then Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with what everybody's saying here, and I would also be on board for a 1-year lease. Not having a breakdown of all the financials and what is coming in, and also, you know, what the taxpayers are paying, I think we really need to look at this. So I would also support a 1-year lease.
Thank you. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. Some of the comments that are here is people want to have financial oversight. I'm not sure if a 1-year versus a 3-year could change that, in that if moving forward, we ask the Lions Club of Tumbler Ridge to be transparent with their revenue and their costs. I don't see how a 1 versus 3 changes that, and other than our expectation to them is that this is what we want. Like, what are we gonna, like, maybe that can be, maybe we'll pause there and have that rationale explained to me a little more on how we could get that versus 3. Like, we can do that at the same time. We can still have regular reporting so that we can also check the values of what the Lions Club's costs are, so that we have some work on it. I'm just not too sure how the 1 versus 3 gives us more opportunity there.
Yeah, so my thoughts are, and, you know, talking with staff and stuff like that is, you know, explaining to them what they would need on a monthly basis, would be able to, for staff to work back with them in regards to that lease option, which to me puts all the stuff back into their hands. They can charge what they want for rates. Because right now, again, they can't use their online booking service that they charge $5. We have it in our fee for service, it's not allowed. So we'd have to bring that forward. That's not gonna be in time for them, for their opening. They're charging $10 or whatever. That's not allowed to be charged. It's right in our fees and charges by law. So my thoughts with the year is it gives 4 months or the 4.5 months that they're open. And then staff is able, they've already got this draft lease together. They understand where the GLs are and what the cost was from the municipality side for doing, I mean, really and truly, it'd be the tank removal, water turn on, water turn off. I don't know it all because I don't want to get, like, that's not my pulse. I mean, I know a lot about it because I used to be down there, but again, I think it's for staff to do that. Have those numbers there and be able to show the lines directly that here's your actual true cost if you were to put in for a tax exemption. They may say the lease is a better option because they can charge what they want. They have a longer option on it. Probably more offers for grants, like we talk about the Lions investment down there. It's because of the grants. They were able to access grants that the DTR cannot access for their upkeep. So that's why I'm saying the year over the 3 years. I mean, don't get me wrong, this could come back in September and still be, we don't need to hold it up, whether that goes to the lease or the best option is still this operator and then do it then. But I think it gives staff an opportunity. Talking with staff, they've not been handed the financials on a routine basis where they can share back and forth, I guess, the information. They're not getting the full things. I'm not sure if Ms. Scott wants to talk to that or not. But they weren't getting the full reports that were needed and such like that. So I think it gives us a better view for us, but also for the Lions, so that they can make a more thorough decision if a lease is better or this operating agreement. And it also gives a chance for council to have the true number of what we're getting out of the, whether it's a 80-20, 70-30, 60-40 split, whatever is decided tonight. if that revenue neutrals us and there's no taxation that we're taxing people to run the campground. Ms. Scott?
I wanted to add that during our lease negotiation discussions, the Lions Club were advised that they could apply for a tax exemption. I couldn't advise whether that would be approved by council or not. That's not my decision, but they were advised that they did have that option to apply for a tax exemption. I also just want to clarify that in the agreement that is before council, the operating agreement, it does specify a 3-year agreement. So if council wanted to do something else, that would be a further amendment to that motion. And in the operating agreement, the draft that's before you, there are some changes that we have made to the financial reporting section that we hope will give us some of that clarification that you've been talking about.
Okay, thank you. I got Councillor Hoffman and Councillor Jilek.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, we've been here before with giving organizations, a 1 year instead of a 3 year. I worry that our timelines, given that we're approaching May right now, that are we all going to be able to get everything in a row for a new lease this coming January? I'd be more comfortable if we left the option available to them to sign a 1 year or a 2 year or some sort of renewal aspect, as opposed to dictating a 1 year, yet another change in terms last second. I mean, I hear what you say, Mayor. I have to admit, I am less worried on trusting the Lions clubs with a little bit of leeway on this. I think your classification is reasonable. If we're subsidizing them, then they are choosing how to distribute funds that we didn't have to subsidize with. But even with that being the case with this group and their history, I am not too worried about that going on for another year or two as we work this out. As you said many times, they've done just so much for the community over the years. I don't want to squeeze them, the bottom line. That's why I'm a little worried about a 1 year, which at this point ends up being 8 months, and all the information, everybody's ducks in a row, an administrative burden on them. I just want to see them have the choice. So I could support a option as opposed to a dictate.
Thank you. Councillor Jilek.
Yeah, in response to Councillor Norbury's inquiry about, what was the difference for the 3 and the 1, for me, the reason that I was thinking about the 1 year was that it gives the Lions the opportunity to reassess as well. I feel like council's pretty comfortable in what they're asking for. And so for me, it's more about the Lions being in there, knowing that this is the expectations. And then, maybe it'll become more burdensome than they want. So for me, the 1 year is actually to give them some grace, so that we can all be on the same page, and then we can all make the best decision moving forward, based on their finances and what it looks like at the bottom line. So for me, the 1 year is to give the Lions grace.
Okay, and I just want to make sure clear to council that's not even on the table. The amendment on the table right now is 20% net to the district to Tumbler Ridge, 80% to the Lions. I guess my comment is, I know that is an amendment in regards to the 20% net, and that's what council is comfortable with. We don't want to change that percent at all from 80-20 split to something different before we move forward. Okay, going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor So and Mayor Kakalka is opposed. Motion carries. Sorry, amendment carries, not the motion. I am going to put another amendment out there that we that the 80% to the Lions, 20% to the district on net revenue is for a 1 year season for 2025. Seconder. Councillor Jilek, discussion. I'll make a couple comments. I'm going to say the same thing. And I understand that we think that staff, timelines and all that. But again, staff has put it in here in regards to some of the reporting that will, I think, benefit not only the DTR, but also the Lions to make sure that they are getting the best option over a operational agreement compared to a lease. Again, with the lease, they would be able to do their online booking and charge the fee. At this point, they are not allowed to do that, as per our fees and charges bylaw. The other thing they would be able to do is set their rates and not have to come forward asking the district to increase the rates through council. So council would have to have that on an agenda to allow the increase. So I think it gives them a chance to see actual numbers, and I know staff, there was a lot of conversation about the picnic tables and stuff like that, and I'm not gonna say it was agreed to or not agreed to, that maybe that's not something that should be jailed out under them, so that the amount of 35,000 that was used for 2024 may not be the true number. I think it also gives us an opportunity to look at other things, like right now, talking with staff when I came in regards to the Lions Campground, was the sandy dump. How often do we clean it? Well, we go down every Monday. So is it full, is it not full? Right? It's 3,000 liters, I believe, or 3,000 gallons. Our vac truck is a 1,000 gallon unit, so it takes 3 loads. But if they're going down every Monday, is it even full? So that again is being jailed out to there. So they may be able to put staff is going to look at putting a tattletale on there to show you when it's 3/4 full or half full, and give the operator the opportunity to call the district when it needs to be empty, so that we actually get a true cost. We don't just have staff showing up to empty it. It's only quarter full. As I'll be honest with you, the lease option, even listening to the delegation, but even when they were in before asking for that option and submitting reports to staff, and the staff asking council to be able to start this process of a draft lease, that's what they wanted, because they wanted that control of being able to charge what rates they want. And that's why I'm putting this year instead of a 2-year or a 3-year, that it gives staff the opportunity to, after they close in September, I mean, I'm not sure how close they are to that lease finalization, but obviously they had enough information to the Lions about the tax exemption. Obviously, that's up to us to either agree on the tax exemption or not. Staff can't tell them that, but to me, that information was all in there, so I think it gives them a better view once they see the actual cost of it's being jailed outright. That's why I put the amendment out there. Councillor Knoxana, then Councillor Norrie.
Thank you. I'm not in favor of the amendment on the floor. I think that a lot of the tracking of financials and stuff can be done over the next 3 years. This is just putting us back in the same position next year of discussing leases and operating agreements for an organization that has specifically asked for this operating agreement with an 80-20 split on net.
Thank you. Councillor Norbury.
Thank you, Mayor Kakalka. I'm hoping for a little more clarification from your motion. Your motion is just saying the cost, the distribution is in question for the 1 year, but the operating agreement would be in for 3?
No, the operating agreement for 1.
Okay, I think.
Sorry, my apologies.
It's okay, thank you for that clarification. Just the way it was worded, I was thinking, like, it seemed like it'd be confusing. Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Councillor Knoxana and Councillor Hoffman's previous comments in putting 1 year agreements in place with organizations. I was part of an organization that operated on 1 year operating agreements. It is some of the worst feelings in the world, having to up in the air, questioning what's going to happen. I think when we've talked about businesses and going 1 year term, and this is where I'm coming back to, is like when we talked about the new operation in the heavy industrial park. I suggested 1 year because I wanted to see that snapshot. But realistically, it's our duty to try and give them a longer term so they can plan for that longer term. And that's kind of where I'm coming back to. Like we agreed at that point. And it changes, right? It's not the same. It's not exactly the same. I appreciate that. But, under the impression moving forward, it sounds like the Lions Club wants this operating agreement so they can make improvements. If they want to look at improvements for 2026, 2027, which I'm sure they will be because they're a great organization that develops that asset for us, I'd like to let them have that opportunity to plan that. Without that multi-year agreement, we're preventing that option. We're adding more stress upon the organization, administrative burden upon the organization by reapplying next year. So I'm still in support of the 3-year agreement. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to make some more comments because my thing, it's not about hold up. It's not about any of that. Honest to God, it gives option to the Lions. So it also gives options that we understand what we're actually giving out of taxation. This year was $35,000. Last year was $23,000. The year before was $18,000. That number seems to increase or decrease. That is my huge concern, is to have to answer that to the taxpayers. I mean, we just increased, not fully supported, but 9% across the board except for major industry. again, we are subsidizing a great organization, which I have no issues with, but to me, this gives them the option, again, something that they came forward for in regards to that lease. I don't think that maybe not having the true information where things were GL'd outright or wrong on what their actual costs would be. So to me, I'm not looking at trying to handcuff them in regards to rentals and stuff like that. I believe, I mean, I never asked staff how close we were to the draft lease being finalized. But I think by them getting the true numbers and stuff as an organization, it really actually it benefit them in the end, I think, to either say this is the only option for us or the lease is a better option for us. And there's the reasons why that, you know, they can change it. I had talked in regards to this with the new inbound president. And I'll be honest, I think we'll see them come forward after the new president takes over in regards to some of it, because they didn't get a chance to have the overview because they just seen the loss that they were seeing, and then realizing that maybe they weren't following the previous agreements in regards to the sharing profit of net over all revenues. So that's my biggest takeaway from there is it's not about handcuffing, it's not about them reapplying, it's about giving staff the opportunity, and yeah, they can still do it over this thing. I don't think we need 2 years or 3 years tracking of financials. I think staff just needs to have that information, and then us also being able to give the information back to lines on what the actual costs are from our side of turning water on, turning water off, and picking up that, for them to make a true decision so that it actually takes our hands out of it. And it's probably better for our community in regards to taxpayers. Councillor Norbury and then Councillor Jilek.
Thank you, Mayor. Just along the comments that we're talking about subsidizing, yeah, we appreciate there were staff times down there. Staff time, you know, we've discussed previously, staff time that are already on payroll for the District of Tumbler Ridge. Unless I'm mistaken, are we paying contractors to perform these functions at the campground?
I'm not sure. Ms. Scott?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Can we get that number?
Do you have the number handy?
No.
Okay, thank you. Because, you know, we've learned in the past that, I mean, we have costs associated to items, maintenance, X duties. We remove those maintenance, we buy new vehicles, but we didn't save any money because we're not saving staff time because we're not laying people off. I'm not saying we should at all. But those staff members that we're putting down there, they're still on the payroll. We're not going to save that money by not having this down there. If we ask the Lions to take this over, we're still paying that funding to our labor line, which is fine. I'm fully fine with that. But we're not going to save this money. That's just what I'm trying to go with when we say we're subsidizing. We're not going to save it by changing it.
Well, it wouldn't be just expense, right? There'd be revenue if the town had it. Sorry, I disagree with you there. Because the revenue would be at the municipality. It wouldn't just be cost to have manpower down there. It'd be the full revenue would come to the DTR. There is a difference there. And I'm not suggesting to go that way. I have no issues with the Lions running the campground. They do an amazing job. I think we just got to give them that option what they wanted. And I think that, you know, being able to track it and do that, that's why I put the 1 year there. Support it or not, I think it gives a full option for both sides. Councillor Jilek.
Yeah, and I think for me, I just, as we discussed the 1 year, the 1 year option for me, there's no reapplying. This isn't an RFP that we're asking them to do. They've never asked, you know, we've never put an RFP out. So all this is for me, putting the year on it, is having a year with the understanding that at the end of the year, we come away both with more information to see what the best way going forward is. And maybe it's the same as that we have for the first year. Maybe we get to the bottom of it and it's all the same and the lease just goes through and we sign a 3-year lease then. The only reason I'm in favor of the 1 year lease is so that we can come to the end of the lease and at that point, the Lions can walk away if they want. This isn't any more, like for me, this doesn't look like any more work for anybody. It's just, let's get to the end of the year, make sure we get our I's dotted and our T's crossed, and then everybody has the option to know how to go forward with all the information. So I'm in favor of the amendment on the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess we keep saying 1 year, but really and truly, we're looking at a season to be able to start this in October, have staff and the Lions get together and have this process probably buttoned up before the end of November. I mean, my understanding, the lease is very close to complete, if that was what the Lions decided to go with. And if it's operational with the 80-20 split, and staff brings it back and shows that we're actually revenue neutral because we were GLing out stuff wrong, it's even better for us. That's why I'll support it, because I think it gives us a bit more information back to the elected official, but staff also get that information. Any other discussion? Okay, gonna call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated. Okay, back to the regular motion that council authorize the mayor and CEO to sign the agreement with Tumbler Ridge Lions Club for the operation of the Flatbed Campground with a 80-20% split of net revenues. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councilor Julick's opposed. Motion carries. Any emailed questions in, Ms. Scott?
No.
Okay, take a recommendation for adjournment. Councilor Noxana.
That the April 23rd, 2025 regular special council meeting be adjourned.
Secondary. Councilor Norbury. All in favor? Carried.